Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hi, Patrick and Councillor Small. We're just hanging on for 5 minutes before we start.
Sorry, I was on mute there for a bit. Thanks, guys. I didn't hear the introductory bit. Apologies.
Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the North Whiteley Forum on Thursday the 16th of February 2023 at Cornerstone Primary School. The time is now 6:05. My name is Councillor Vivian Atchwell, chairperson of this committee. The meeting is being recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you are joining us online, please turn your camera and microphones off until your item is called when you wish to speak. Can everyone please ensure their mobile phones are on silent? And can I also remind members to use their microphones and speak directly into them, which I'll try and remember to do. In the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all instructions given to you by our team. For the benefit of the members of the public, the forum is made up of councillors. I'm just going to ask, just quickly go around the room and introduce each other, as we haven't had a forum in public for some time. So can't start with you, please, Councillor Fern.
Good evening, Councillor Fern, Winchester County City Council. Sorry.
Good evening, Steve Miller, Winchester City Council.
Councillor Frank Pearson. Councillor Frank Pearson, Winchester.
Mike Evans, Whiteley Town Council.
Councillor Michael Kern from Winchester City Council. Sean Woodward. I'm here this evening as a Hampshire County Councillor. Just say, Chairman, how wonderful it is 2 years after every other entity started meeting in public that we're here in public and live and real. So thank you.
Eric Bodger, Cambridge Parish Council.
Good evening, Joanne Burton, Farnborough Council, and it's nice to meet you all finally in person.
Ray Alborough, an officer of Hampshire County Council representing the Highway Authority.
I'm Jeff Davis of Tetra Tech. I represent the consortium.
Hilary Oliver, I'm the North Whiteley Implementation Officer at Winchester City Council.
Good evening, I'm Julie Pinnock, Service Lead for Built Environment at Winchester City Council.
Thank you very much, everybody. And can I welcome to all members of the public here this evening. It's wonderful to see so many faces here. And can I also thank Tim Clark for hosting this evening at the school. So returning now to the agenda, the first agenda item is apologies. Matthew.
Good evening, Chair members. So we've had apologies from Councillor Pretty, apologies from Councillor McLean, who's been replaced by Councillor Kern this evening. Apologies from Councillor Therese Evans, who's been replaced by Councillor Fern. And we also have Councillor Lumby and Councillor Small, who are joining this online, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, and we also have Patrick Bingham online as well from Hampshire County Council. Thank you. So item number 2, members, do we have any disclosures of interest? No, okay, thank you very much. And item number 3 is Chairman's announcements. I don't actually have any, to be honest, but just like Councillor Woodward said, it's great to be back in public again. I hope we can carry on with these later on. That won't be my decision, that will be up to the Cabinet and the Leader of the Council to make that decision when it comes around in May. So item number 4, we have public participation. And I believe that's Tim Clark, the head teacher. Would you like to come up to the mic, please, Tim? Just want to put the mic on. I'll try not to be too strict, but we've got about 3 minutes.
Sounds like it's working. So thank you very much for being invited to ask a question. As a head teacher at Cornerstone, one of the key things obviously that we're trying to do is look at supporting our local community and growing community. And one of the key questions that keeps coming up from a number of families is about safer routes to schools. So it is about pavements, it is about parking, but a key question at the moment has been raised for about 18 months to me is about the pathway to the south of our boundary, which will then link up with the northern end of North Whiteley. We have a number of families who live only about 300-400 metres that way, some of whom don't drive, who at the moment are doing almost a mile's walk all the way round. And we've had another family, fortunately we've managed to resolve that, who previously had been walking down the road from Botley, where there were no pavements. So it is a concern for families, it is a concern for me that we've got a number of families who are struggling at times with that safe walking route. I've, as I said, over the last 18 months been saying I have been reassured that the path will be coming shortly. But at the moment there is still no progress on it, and I'm just here to say I would appreciate any support in that being started and finished as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I don't know if the officers are able to respond this evening, or Jeff at all.
I'm certainly going to touch upon it in my presentation, but I can respond now if you like. Basically, we're aiming to get that path in of the course of the coming summer. The roads that are under construction at the moment, Whiteley Way and Curbridge Way, are effectively a building site, but we're due to open those to public through traffic at the end of June. So the aim will be to get the two to link together, at that point or after that point, and hopefully before the schools come back in September. That's the aim. There's some way to go to get there. We've still got issues of planning to get through, legal agreements, Section 278 agreements, and actually constructing it. Constructing it might actually be the easy bit, to be honest. Trying to get through the technicalities does take time. It has taken much longer than I would like. We would like to have built the first section over a year ago and have it delivered already, but we are where we are. I hope that answers your question or gives you some reassurance.
It does, and it allows me to go back to families with an answer. And all I can say is that if we're able to have it in place for this coming September 23, when school reopens after some holidays, I'm sure it'll be much appreciated by the families. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Tim. Thank you. We actually had another question from a member of the public. Unfortunately, can't be here this evening. So, Matthew, would you like me to read that out, or do you want to read it?
Yes, please, Chair, if that's okay.
So this is from Mr. Fletcher. I was thinking the parking is getting worse than it seems to be disregarded for the off-road parking and double yellow lines. At some point, it would be good to see double yellow lines enforced. I'm guessing that will be when the road is adopted. The parking across pavements, which is generally outside people's properties, seems to be because of the poor planning for off-road parking. I'm not sure what power there is to take any action on this now, but I would hope this is some recognition that the off-road parking here is already not adequate enough. I really think the whole estate will become an eyesore in the future, with cars parked on verges and footpaths, etc., if nothing improves. Again, it seems like much ado about nothing, so apologies for the rant, but over Christmas there was generally where vehicles parked in a way that would be obstructed emergency vehicles passing through, which is really the main concern. I don't know if officers, this is something we can answer later, or any response to that at all?
Chair, I'm quite happy to try and answer that question. I think I have to say, whilst the roads within the site are private, this is a matter for the developers to resolve. I think there have been double yellow lines provided at the northern end of the site. They are not supported by a traffic regulation order, and the County Council will only do a traffic regulation order when the roads are adopted. They'll certainly do the preparation just before the roads are adopted. So there's nothing the County Council can do at the present time, but it's something that we will be looking into as time progresses and the roads are becoming close to adoption. There is a problem in some respects because the roads will be adopted on the piecemeal fashion, because there are quite a number of road adoption agreements still to be entered into for the roads to be adopted. So there's nothing that we can do at the present time as the County Council, but as I said at the beginning, this is a matter for the developers. The problems we do have is that if the developers put additional yellow lines down and they remain at the time the traffic regulation order is advertised, there can be some criticism of the County Council, because members of the public might see that because there are yellow lines already in place, the decision has been prejudiced. So that could be a problem. So what would need to happen is that those existing yellow lines will have to be removed prior to the public consultation stage.
And I guess with that, it's all expenses on top of that, isn't it? Because to advertise,
it's a matter for the developers to remove them, and unfortunately, the marks of the removal process are not particularly pretty at the end of the day. So that's a matter of a discussion that colleagues of mine will have to have with the developers, and I may very well be involved. The other thing is we have to bear in mind that the effectiveness of parking restrictions relies on the enforcement. and there could be no guarantee that every day there will be a member of the contractors who do this work for the county council present on the site. So that's a matter to bear in mind as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ray. Thank you. I just wondered if anyone in attendance would like to ask any questions while the floor's open to you. Okay, thank you very much. So item number 5 is minutes of the previous meeting held virtually on the 14th of November. Can I take it that the minutes are okay and everyone has approved them? Yep, okay, thank you very much. Now we're back to you, Ray, I think. Oh no, it's Patrick. Patrick, update from Hampshire County Council with Junction 9 roundabout 1. Up to you, Patrick.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me along this evening. It's a relatively brief update. As I'm sure you're aware, works have been progressing and there are only a few remaining activities to complete at Junction 9 and R1 roundabout. The works, there's a couple of areas on the M27 Junction 9 westbound off slip where we need to put a secondary location sign installed and some adjustment to the curbing, and that work is on hold pending National Highways agreement to road space. They've got some works ongoing towards Hamble Bridge on the motorway. We can't get onto that slip road to complete those works until the associated works are completed or National Highways allow us the road space to go and do that. That said, M27 Junction 9 itself is generally complete and the benefits of the scheme are being realised. Whiteley Way South, i.e. which is the southbound section between R1 roundabout, Parkway roundabout and Junction 9 itself, we've still got some vehicle restraint barrier works to complete on the northbound approach to Parkway roundabout on that section, and a lane closure will be in place over the next couple of weeks to complete that work. The traffic signals at the junction finally been switched on at Parkway roundabout. I'm sure you're all pleased about that, and I know there was a lot of concern and discussion about the traffic management setup at the junction itself whilst it was under temporary operation, and we'll be reviewing that in our wash-up meetings with the contractor and with the project team to understand why that took place in the way that it did and how we can put measures in place to improve things. The roundabout itself at Parkway, the traffic signals are under temporary timings at the moment. You may experience a little bit more delay there, particularly during off-peak periods, and we're waiting for the works on, we need to wait for the works on Whiteley Way to complete until we can fully commission those signals and put them onto adaptive timings when the roundabout operation will become more efficient. In more general terms, works will be continuing across the site for during the remainder of February and some of March, and there will also be demobilisation during March, I'm sure you're pleased to hear, and then the scheme will be finally complete. Are there any questions?
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Patrick for that update. Obviously, it's great to see that things are now nearing a sensible form of conclusion. The comments I get most commonly through you, Chairman, to Patrick are about the lining on the roundabouts and specifically the lane markings and what is stated about which lane you should be in to do which particular manoeuvre. For example, coming from Sedgensworth roundabout and wishing to travel east towards Fareham on the M27, and what meets you as you get onto the Junction 9 is a M27 west, 2 lanes to go west, one of which of course is the slip, which is there, you know, and always has been with the lights permanently green, and the other one which is also telling you to go west, but of course a lot of the traffic joining at Sedgensworth actually wants to go east. It only seems to have 1 lane to do that in, and then of course it becomes a couple more lanes. Now on the Sedgensworth roundabout, of course there's lots of helpful dashed and they will be when you repaint them anyway, lots of dashed lines which tend to guide everybody around where they need to go. Whereas at junction 9, it's problematic. And I just wonder whether there's going to be some sort of safety audit to sort those markings out. Markings seem to have been an issue throughout the project, but I'm acutely aware that these are the permanent markings now, and it just doesn't seem terribly logical. And there's a bit of, it's like dodgems actually going around the junction 9 roundabout, particularly wanting to go east.
I think you're right in terms of how you've described the lane arrangements from Sedgeworth roundabout onto junction 9. There's one lane provided for eastbound traffic onto the M27, and that then flares out into 2 lanes as that traffic travels around the roundabout. That is as it's been configured and modelled to be efficient in terms of its operation. The markings at the roundabout itself were laid in an iterative way because we required road space in order to get out and do them, and so they weren't all in place as they are now, and I think that perhaps generated some of the comments as they were being completed. In the final configuration, I think there's a period of adjustment. We've gone from an existing roundabout which has an existing culture to a revised roundabout where the lane arrangements have changed. I think we need to give time to for things to settle in, for people to get used to it. But as part of that, we also need to be mindful of undertaking review. There will be a safety audit, which we refer to as the 3rd safety audit, an RSA 3, which would take place in the coming couple of months, I believe, and that will review the operation and consider its safety standing. And if there are any recommendations on that safety audit, they will then be brought forward and implemented. So I think that there does need to be a settling in period. We will continue to review it and consider the need for additional tracking markings. There are some tracking markings in place there to see how effectively they're working. My experience of switching on junctions which have been altered is that there does need to be a period to allow traffic to get used to it, and then if there are further alterations or changes required, then they are brought forward in due course. Does that help by way of explanation, Councillor Woodward?
It's kind of helping, Chairman, but I think these tracking markings clearly do need sorting. But I say again, and there are other issues, but I'm just highlighting the coming from Sedgeworth one. Of course, what it's tending to do then is, if you want to go east, it's tending to put all that traffic in the right-hand lane between Sedgeworth and junction 9, which of course is total waste of lane, because if people felt they were getting to a point on the junction 9 roundabout where both the lanes ahead of them were telling them they were going to go east, because going west is so easy. You go in the left-hand lane and it takes you all the way around non-stop. Nobody needs to use any other lane except that one to go west on the M27. So it would just appear, and I'm no traffic engineer, and I know it's very easy to be very annoying to engineers telling them their jobs, but it just seems to have a logic that you're losing lane usage space on the link between Sedgeworth and J9. And you don't need to be, because everything that's going west, it doesn't need a second lane to go west, because you just sweep around without a problem.
Well, I think that the lane markings are correct as the junction's been designed and been modelled in terms of the capacity, which analyses the flows and the movements, and so it can appear illogical in some respects. I think it's always worthy of challenge. I'd certainly take your comments back to the design team and ask them to review things to explore whether the markings are genuinely reflecting the capacity that's there and the requirements that are there. And I think we need to gather their feedback and their comments on that, and I'll let you know what the outcome of that is, Councillor.
Thank you very much for that, Chairman. Perhaps when Patrick's looking, and sorry to hog this, but also coming out of Rookery Avenue onto R1, because there are plenty of lanes there, most people will be going towards the motorway. They've only got one lane out of the pile of lanes which are there coming out. Parkway going just straight over seems to have its own dedicated lane. Again, logic would dictate that you would have 2 lanes going to the M27, and the left-hand lane would be going to Parkway or down to Tesco's, down that way. And then, of course, once you get around the roundabout, you're playing dodgems to get in the lanes, because then suddenly you're presented with 3 lanes to go to the M27, where you were in just 1 lane. It just feels messy as someone who drives it 3 or 4 times a day.
I know your experience of driving around it, and obviously value your thoughts and comments on this, and I will feed those back to the design team and ask them to review it, and I'll get you a response on that in terms of explaining why it's been set up in the way that it has, and we'll consider whether or not there's any need to revise things along the lines that you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Does anybody else have any questions? I've got one. I'm not sure whether it's for you, for yourself, or for Ray. This is regarding the Whiteley Road lights. I know some cameras were put up there probably about Christmas time, because people keep skipping the lights, and there's been a number of quite bad accidents on that area. I just wondered if you have an update on that.
I have an update. Excuse me, Madam Chairman. The situation is the occurrence of the accidents has caused concern at the County Council, to the point that the operation of the junction has been reviewed. A meeting took place with our safety experts, and a scheme of remedial works was required of the developer. Those works have not yet been carried out, and as of earlier this week, they have been given 4 weeks to carry out the works. The works are the provision of additional markings on the carriageway in the left turn lane. So in addition to the arrows that tell drivers that they should be turning left, there will be the words "turn left" on 2 different occasions. And there will be additional signage provided on the verge, including the removal of the developer's private sign. So, as I said, they've got 4 weeks to do the works, and we're hoping that they will be able to finish them within that time period. The response I've had from the developer is that he will chase the contractor, which to me suggests that he has ordered the works, and the responsibility for them not being provided is with his contractor. But these works are being chased. I had a look at the operation of the lights this afternoon with a colleague, and they seem to be working perfectly well. So I think the incidents that have occurred there are clearly undesirable, and we don't want to have incidents like that. But I suspect at the end of the day, we'll find out that the main cause of the incidents is driver error.
So could I just ask one further question then? So after the adjustments have been made, will that be monitored again to see if that's helped or not?
Oh, it certainly will. We are considering having a camera placed to record the movement of vehicles through the junction, so that they can actually be viewed afterwards, rather than just relying on the evidence provided by the people involved.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick, for your input.
Thank you, Chairman. If there are no further questions for me, is it okay if I leave the meeting?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks.
Thank you. Bye. We now go on to item number 7, update from Winchester City Council with the government's update. Hilary, I understand you have an update, please.
Good evening. Just to recap from the previous forum meeting, Winchester City Council undertook a community governance review to ascertain how the area should be governed, which included public meetings and consultation. The results of the review and recommendations were discussed at the Licensing and Regulation Committee on the 7th of December 2022. The recommendations were accepted by the committee, one of which was to undertake a further consultation just to allow those with an interest to make any further comments. Following this consultation, a report and recommendations were presented at full council on the 18th of January 2023. The recommendations were agreed and the boundary has been adjusted so all of the North Whiteley development falls under Whiteley Town Council. The order was made on the 8th of February and will come into force on the 1st of April 2023. We would like to thank all involved in the project, from both the town, the parish council and our city councillors, and this will enable the elections for Whiteley Town Council to take place with the adjusted boundary in May this year. So that's the update. If anybody's got any other questions about what we're doing. Any questions at all? Yeah, yes, Councillor Bodger.
Not a question really, just thanks to Hilary and the other officers and to you for chairing the working party and making it all go so smoothly.
Thank you, Eric. I'd also like to ditto that. It was quite a lot of work to get through in time, so the elections can happen in May. I'd just like to say, as Hilary has mentioned, there will be parish council elections this May, and if anybody's interested, please to step forward and try and help your local community. Thank you, Hilary, for the update.
May I ask a question?
Yes,
this may have been said because we discussed at council, the last council meeting, if you recall. I missed in the reading the proportionality of Kirch Parish Council onto the Whiteley Town Council. Is there a laid down figure? Otherwise, as possibility, from a democratic point of view, for all of Kirch Parish councillors to be voted out of the town council. So perhaps Mike can answer that. I don't know. When we've always looked at this before, we've made sure that there's always representation of the parish on the town council. Now, is there a facility within the governance to allow for that, to make sure it does happen? It may have been said, but I missed it. Please remind me if it has been.
So there's still going to be two parish councils. One's Curdridge Parish Council, who have, I believe, is it 10 councillors? Is that right, Eric?
Yes, we have 7 councillors and Whiteley has 11. Part of the review was to determine whether that would change as a result. And I think Mike can probably let you know that 11 seemed to be the normal amount for that size of parish council. So we were happy with that. And we didn't have any Curdridge Parish councillors from North Whiteley. So there's no issue there, but of course they could remain on parish council, on Curdridge Parish Council, if they had been elected, because they live within 3 miles of the boundary.
Yeah, yes, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah,
Safety if both the chair.
Yeah, just to confirm, we have 11 councillors. We did discuss this at the review. We also took notice from the National Association of Local Councils. We felt that was the right number. So I think that was agreed at the meeting. But we do have 2 councillors, residents from North Whiteley, already on the town council. And obviously we're encouraging other residents, as Vivian said, to come along and if they wish to be on the parish and town council.
Secretary, I mean, if the 2 bodies are happy with that representation, then I'm happy as well. I just wanted to be clarified to make sure it has been covered.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, yes, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, can I also add that, I mean, we're working very closely because we know the boundary is, and obviously some people right on the boundary, so we're working very closely with Curdridge Parish Council on all aspects and will in the future, of course.
Sure.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Any further questions regarding that? No. Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to Where are we? Item number 8, update from Jeff. Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This presentation, it won't look dramatically different to the one I gave only 2 months ago, really, because it hasn't been really enough time. But I'll just fly through and give you a brief update. Next slide, please, Matthew. Quick overview. You'll have seen this before. We're responsible for all the roads towards the top down to around about 3, and then we're working on the off-site highways works between round about 3 and round about 1 shortly. So unfortunately, when Patrick's works come to a finish, we're going to start, which will make us very popular, I'm sure. Next slide, please. Bluebell Way opened to the public almost 2 years ago, no, over 2 years ago now. The big change recently is that the bus service commenced in early January and is now running along. We're in legal negotiations currently with a developer who's going to take on the Southern Local Centre, and hopefully that will come forward fairly soon and move to development. A point to note about that is we're using that car park over there at the moment for parent use for dropping off for the school. That will continue during the development of the local centre there. That's been put into the sales particulars, so we have to keep that in use. Next slide, please, Matthew. A couple of brief stills from the video you'll see later. This one's looking at Bluebell Central and the former development, particularly in the middle there. Next slide, please, Matthew. Again, a further view looking to the south with Cornerstone School just in the distance there, and Bluebell Way to the left. Simmons development is one underway as well towards the bottom of the site, the southern end. Next slide, please, Matthew. This is the slide that recaps on the conversation earlier about the footpath 9 cycleway. Brief status review. Well, basically we had planning permission for it. We had an issue with the design, a design clash which had to be overcome. That has been granted technical approval, and we're going through the process of updating the planning permission that we already had. Following on from that, we'll close out the Section 278 agreement, which is already in draft and ready to go, subject to getting updated drawings, more or less. And as I said earlier on, we're hoping to start that construction this summer. We're following through with the phase 2 section, which is the green bit on the plan you can see, going over towards the future secondary school and linking up with the new roads that are now virtually complete. Next slide, please, Matthew. Offsite Whiteley Way, I mentioned that. We gained our legal agreements back in June. We have now let a contract to start the works, and we are submitting applications for traffic management proposals to gain permits to work on the highway. That's a process that's going to take us, it's going to take us 3 months, certainly from now. Those have to be agreed not only with the highway authority, but also with the retail centre down there. So we're looking at a likely start date in June at the moment. It could slide a bit depending on how those negotiations go. With a sort of completion in late summer 2024 at the moment. Next slide, please, Matthew. Just look at what we call phase 3, which are the main roads, Whiteley Way and Curbridge Way, in the centre of the site. So moving from north to south, the Northern Access Junction was completed some time ago. The Botley Road cycleway virtually complete. I think the street lights still have to be resolved, and that's going fairly slowly. It's quite difficult to get space on the road to go and do some of these things. Whiteley Way South, which is the road on the right hand side of the 2 in the middle of the site, that is now complete. Sorry, south, that's the Woodlands Chase, I'm mixing myself up. That was complete some time ago. Whiteley Road and Curbridge Way, the main central section, Those were all completed just before Christmas. We're now working our way through remedials and sort of final finishes. They are acting as access for, building sites, but we do have a deadline to open these roads to through traffic at the end of June, as I mentioned earlier on, and the aim is to achieve that. Next slide, please, Matthew. Some photographs from that section of the road. This is up in the north, just to the south of the Vistry development, the roundabout, Burbage Way and Whiteley Way split from that roundabout top of the site. Next slide, please. A view of Whiteley Way that's just coming to completion, built by Vistry themselves. The street lights are not there yet, but the road is curbs, footpaths, services are all there. Next slide, please. Just a brief look at Bridge 3, which leads on up from Taylor Wimpey's Woodland Chase development. That's been complete for some couple of months now. Next slide, please, Matthew. There's a view down to the south, looking down towards Sawpit Copse over Taylor Wimpey's developments and Persimmon's development off slightly more to the centre right. Next slide, please, Matthew. Brief update on the delivery on the housing. As we stood the last time I did a check on this, we had detailed planning permission for almost 3,000 houses, 85% of the total. Of that total, some 1,551 houses have commenced and 906 houses have completed and are occupied at that point. Next slide, please, Matthew. Quick update on open space delivery. We're looking to get allotment 1 and those 2 leaps handed over as soon as we can. We've got some snags and bits and pieces to sort out. We've had a setback on our main landscaping contract, which is unfortunate. The contractor we had engaged has basically failed or let us down, so we're having to start again to find a new contractor and trying to rescue what we can of the current planting season. So that is a bit of a setback for us. We'll keep you informed as that goes forward. Next slide, please, Matthew. I mentioned the bus service. We started off with temporary stops. We are due to start putting in shelters in the near future. That the bus service is being monitored. It really needs to be used. As long term, if it's not supported, it will stop. It does need support. So I sort of encourage anybody to use the bus, or you might, long term it'll be lost, unfortunately. Next slide, please, Matthew. I'll touch upon the issue of parking. It was picked up earlier on in the earlier question. We've had a number of issues around the site. I think everybody's talking about it. I've focused on a couple of areas, particularly near the school. The top picture is on the other side of the road from the school here. The bottom picture is just down Bluebell Way, around the corner from where the footpath comes in and crosses the road to go over to the school, to go down footpath 9. This causes problems. We've got people being pushed out onto the road. It's a combination of residents, visitors, people dropping off kids at school. It has the potential to cause accidents. It's definitely causing damage. You can see it there on the top picture to just to the verges and so on. There is a risk of liability on people, because if there was an accident and the police judged that a car parking was contributed to that accident, the car owner could end up being liable. It's true to say that anybody who's bought a house here has generally signed up to a sale agreement that has a covenant in it that says that you shouldn't be blocking access ways. So what we're doing now, Ray mentioned it earlier on, we're investigating what actions we should take to try and encourage people to use particularly if you can't really see it in that picture that I've got, it's too small, but the car parking area in the distance that's been set aside for school drop-off was largely empty at the same time as all these cars are sort of parked near the school. So encourage people to use the parking that's provided. What we'll have to do is start putting up further red and white barriers to try and deter people from parking in some of these areas. It's ugly. It doesn't look very nice. It works, but it's not great. I did notice on the way in here that West, the developer who have the houses just next to that verge, have just gone out and regrassed it and placed a number of rocks around the outside to try and deter parking. That does look a lot better than the red and white barriers, and I will take the discussions with the consortium further as to what else we should do, and that will be further signage. And Ray said we can't really do, we can put down double yellow lines, but it doesn't really work particularly. We can't enforce it. We're trying to agree additional signage and so on that we should put down longer term, but those are all linked to the roads actually being adopted, and that is some way off yet. So it'll remain private land for a while. I think I'll leave that there at that point. I think that's the last slide, Matthew, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
We've also got the video, I think, if you want to.
Okay, just watch the video.
Play through it, and I'll try and keep up with it from a distance. So as usual, we start up in the north of the site and flying down through the Vistry development, down Whiteley Way, down to the first roundabout where Whiteley goes, Burbage Way goes off to the right and Whiteley Way goes off to the left. We're just looking along the edge of Whiteley Way at the moment. Further down to the works that I mentioned that have sort of recently largely finished. That's looking towards the area where the future secondary school will be off to the east of Whiteley Way, lying down over Bridge 2. And then down looking over the Taylor MP development, Woodlands Chase, with Thorpe Copse there on the left, and the Persimmon developments off to the right. And the video goes back up to the site, to the top of the site, north of the site, and sort of focuses in on some of the individual developments as it comes down. That is the Whiteley Way section that's been built by Vistry. For the Vistry developments. And that's looking over the Taylor MP development that's just sort of getting started just to the north of Bridge 2. So we're now over Bluebell Way and following Bluebell Way down around the corner down towards the school where we are, towards the top of the picture there. It's the Crest development to the other side of the road from here. And we're now looking at the Persimmon developments, the one that started on the left and the future one on the right. Flying back over towards Whiteley Gardens and Woodlands Chase again. Looking towards Whiteley Retail Centre in the distance there. Focusing in on some of it, that's the Foreman development just off Bluebell Way. Persimmon again in the south. And another view of the Persimmon developments. So any questions?
Yep, thanks, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Kuhn.
Thank you very much. Just obviously a fresh pair of eyes. I'm deputising on this committee this evening, just looking at that kind of errant parking issue. I know as a society we're trying to encourage people away from cars, and cars are becoming the bad thing to have for the environment, which is, you know, we've got to look at better ways for doing that. But whether we like it or not at the moment, we still have cars, and families will have more than one car. If they've got children, when they get to 17, they're going to have more cars. The problem with the errant parking, is it just at the moment because the school, I know there's going to be in long term 3 new schools in the north of Whiteley, is the problem just around school times, or has there been a miscalculation in people parking their cars in their properties which they're moving into? Because obviously if it's a problem that isn't just around school time, well, we're just under 1,000 occupied so far. Is it going to be a problem that's going to get worse and needs a little bit of a better look at? Because unfortunately we do have this cultural thing where people want to park out the front of their house if they've got shopping or bits and pieces. So it's just an assessment from you on whether you think it's an errant problem just with the schools at the moment, and once the new schools are built that will be fine and people won't have to drive as far to get their children to schools and park, or is it a miscalculation on the sense of how much provision is needed for those people moving in?
It's quite a complicated question, but it's definitely not just around the school. I picked on that because that's the most unsafe, shall we say. It is happening elsewhere. I know people like to park outside the front of their house, but they've been provided with car parking on the other side of the house, particularly where we have that frontage development which comes right up to the road. There isn't a car parking space in front of the house. But that doesn't mean that people should park on the cycleways that run past the house, or bump up on the footpaths. We're trying to make sure we're filtering out, because builders and can be the world's worst for parking as well. But this clearly now is not the builders parking. We've just been careful about that. Maybe some. There are lots of other people coming around delivering parcels and so on, and they deliver to the front door, temporarily park out the front. These are key issues. I can't really answer about the question about the number of parking spaces provided. It's more a question for the individual developers and so on. But because we look after the main infrastructure, and I'm trying to deal with that issue. It's longer term. It has the feeling it could get worse. It's always the case that when the schools open, the people who are populating the school will tend to be coming in from elsewhere, perhaps depending on the needs of the council, and that works its way through over time, and people are able to sort of, more people living in the area are able to put their children into the local school, and that sort of thing tends to work out over time with new developments. Longer term, yes, we're trying to, we should be trying to encourage people to use public transport, cycling and so on. But it is a difficult question to answer, and I'm sure I haven't answered it fully adequately here this evening.
Madam Chair, sorry, would you mind if I added something?
Yeah, please do.
I've looked just a little bit at the parking situation on the site. Thankfully, Mike very kindly provided a series of photographs for us to have a look at, because the town council, I believe, are concerned about the parking. And in my view, and Julie might be able to help me here, but I presume that the city council have their own car parking standards, and as the local planning authority, they would not have approved these schemes without the developers meeting those car parking standards. So I'm going to assume that it's not necessarily the families having more cars than is provided for in their individual houses. But I do accept your point about children growing up, becoming 17, having cars, etc. But not every house has children of 17 coming at the same time. So there's bound to be some of that, but not at every home. The other thing is, I believe that the people who are parking the cars on the footpath cycleway, clearly they should not, because if we're going to encourage people to cycle, there's no point in allowing people to block it with cars. That's a definite discouragement for cycling. But I believe they park there because it's the most convenient place to park to get to the house. You mentioned shopping, and we all know what that's like to carrying it into the house, and people do like to park close to their front door. But it's a question of discipline of the residents, and if they could more park in their allocated car parking and not on the streets, I think the site would A, look better and be safer for pedestrians and cyclists.
Thank you, Ray. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'll just start on the car parking, if I may, and the excellent question that was asked. But my point is a little more fundamental. You've said twice, I think now, you can't enforce the car parking. Oh, yes, you can. This is a private site. The roads are private. They're unadopted. If you want to paint yellow lines and bring in a parking enforcement company to enforce them, you can do that. You can probably make some money along the way, but there's no reason whatsoever why you cannot put in your own parking restrictions. People do it every day on their own businesses. It happens on private estates all over the country. You've got a private estate with 906 homes occupied. You can paint your yellow lines, you can put your time limits, you can enforce them. When you come to a stage of adoption, I think the point's already been made that obviously the only lines that will go will be the ones that the Highway Authority agrees, but at the moment you can do your own enforcement. None of this needs to be happening.
I do agree. I recognise that. I suppose we're trying to build up towards that as being, ultimately we may have to do that sort of thing, which we'd like to try and encourage people first not to do it, and see how far that goes, and use barriers and so on before we start trying to effectively drag away our customers' cars or that sort of thing. But we will have to do that if there are issues of health and safety. We will have to eventually take that sort of action, or maybe sooner rather than later if it's persistent, and in areas that, just as I mentioned, which are clearly causing a significant risk to other members of the public.
Thank you, Chairman. Here at the moment, your estate is being trashed. It's being trashed by animals behind wheels of cars, all over pavements, verges, everything else. So, if you want to make it look nice, you're going to have to step up and do it. It won't cost you anything. That's the irony of this. You don't have to pay to get a parking company in to do the work. They'll take the income. The other question I had, Chairman, is about buses, specifically bus patronage, because I always look at buses with interest. I have to confess, from the outside, not the inside, and they're empty. A lot of them seem to be, and I think Jeff probably touched on that, talking about the long term and continued funding. So, number one, on that section, do you have any idea about the patronage on the buses that are kindly at the moment being paid for by the development? And secondly, when does the funding run out? When is it that people have to literally use it or lose it?
But it's very early days. I've only heard one figure really, which is only after about 2 weeks, and it was quite low. It was only something like 32 journeys within about a fortnight, something like that. But that was also early January with freezing cold and so on. I think we're going to give it a few months before we ask the bus representatives to come in and talk to the meeting and give us a bit of a further update, as to how well it's going, as to whether some of the other sort of measures being used to encourage people, how effective they're through the travel plan coordinator route as well.
Thank you. My last question, Chairman, was around Whiteley Way. Jeff gave about 3 different end dates, but he might have been talking about different stages. So can I ask the simple question, when will Whiteley Way be completely open onto Botley Road right the way through?
Whiteley Way will be open at the end of June. Because I'm talking about different sections of Whiteley Way all the time, and there's my off-site Whiteley Way that was a different date. But the end of June this year is the target to open that road, both roads, Whiteley and Curbridge Way, through traffic.
Okay, so that's from Botley Road through to Tesco's.
Yeah,
totally open in June.
Okay. Which will then tend to reduce some of the traffic on Bluewell Way, because it's a better route.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward actually covered my question about, I was going to ask about the bus service. But while I have the floor, I think the parking, there needs to be a long-term solution, and barriers clearly are not a long-term solution. And I think it's probably a lot of it, residential suffers parking issues at the best of time, but I think a lot of it's caused with the low level curbs. You know, all the roads have got these low level curbs that practically the road and the pavement are almost level. So I think it's a huge concern. I think it's encouraging people parking on pavements because of the low level curbing. And I also think it's a safety issue with pedestrians. You know, drivers do bump and clip the curbs, and there are times where drivers do mount the curbs. And with this low level curbing, I think it's a safety issue, and I think it should be reviewed before the rest of the development continues.
Any comments at all, Jeff?
Well, this is a design requirement. I'd say that it's not that we wanted to put in low curbs. It's more like a design agreement between highway authorities and planning authorities as to how the development works. Often it's to do with shared spaces, and that's designed to slow traffic down, creates doubt and so on in people's minds. It's a more of a modern approach. We would have put in whatever curbs that were wanted. Basically, it's not particularly our choice to put in low curbs. It's more of a joint choice, if you see what I mean.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Parking is always going to be an issue. I mean, I like your optimistic comment about changing human behaviour. More than several years ago, if you can quantify that, we had a talk with a planning inspector about parking generally, and he commented that parking is the time of Prescott in what we then called declog, because everything seemed to get clogged up in the government ministries. They've changed the name now. It sounds a bit better, so it didn't ring off. He said parking is the least sustainable aspect of what we're trying to do in the local plans. In other words, even planning inspectors couldn't justify the policies where we're laying down X number of parking spaces according to the size of the house. It was never going to work in the long term, and indeed it has proved it's not. Now, the problem we've got here, and I find myself in a rather unusual position defending the county council, although in this case I don't think you can entirely blame them. We've got here a new school which is delighted if this room is anything to go by. Delightful school, purpose built, perfect, as far as we can see. But we're also in the middle of a construction site. Now, clearly parents are going to want to therefore drive the children to the school. Now, no school has enough parking places. When I got a school in my own village, it goes back more than 100 years. And we've always had a parking situation during school run time. Not just now, but always. It's absolutely chaos. I don't think you can name a single school in the country that doesn't have that. So it's not really surprising that we have this. The difficulty is this peculiar belief or argument we're all doing, not peculiar, it's a realistic, and I understand what we're doing, and you caused it yourself, Jeff. Oh, climate emergency, we have to get out of our cars and walk and cycle. You're not going to do that in a building site. Hopefully, as time goes on, people will be able to do that. But then also, the roads are narrower than to allow for parking. This is all part of the town planning issue. We've got a key footpath missing. How many of those cars as a result of that footpath, which we heard the head mention it, we talked about it at the last meeting, where people, because they can't use that footpath, and we're told it's just outside the development boundary, oddly, the footpath up to Whiteley, also outside the development boundary, because on the other side of the road, There it is, super footpath. I don't know how frequently that footpath is used, and I'm delighted. It's a lovely footpath, especially linking to the railway station, which is a key footpath. And yet we've got a key footpath here, which people can't push prams down it to get their children to school. And we're wondering why we've got a parking problem, because those people now are going to get in their cars to go the longer distance. So we can sort little things like that out, Jeff, Ray, we're going to have a problem with this. And then as far as climate emergency is concerned, I'm afraid we're all going to be in for an incredible shock from a weather point of view and really wake our ideas up. So we'll all start to think properly and carefully about planning to allow for climate emergency. We've done this, I noticed the bridge, great aerial views there, and it's interesting, those who have seen those various drone flights, how those bridges, and that looks as though it's actually built for 1 in an 80-year storms, which the Met Office is talking about, but the planners aren't. They're still talking about 1 in 100-year storms. And I say, Julie is smiling at that because she knows it's one of my bugbears, you know. And this is something we've got. We haven't planned for the parking because we hoped by this time we wouldn't need it. And because they're not TROs, I think somebody said that, I think Sean said it, traffic regulation orders, you can't control it. Police can't come along and do something about it. All they can do is tap on the shoulder and say, perhaps this is not a good place to park. There's no TRO to enforce that. And there won't be until these roads are adopted. So, I mean, there's many rants of mine, but I think let's be pragmatic about this. Let's be realistic about this. That people won't conform to what the planners theoretically think it should be, i.e. changing human behaviour, until really they're pushed into it, because there's always, I think, excuse everyone my language here, but there's a bugger principle. There's a law there, bugger that law, I'm going to do what I want. And there's what, I don't know, 5% of our population that does that. I'm not saying that's happening here in Whiteley. This is the difficulty the law has. This is the difficulty the planners have got, that the developers have got. They've put in what they said they're going to put in, and we've all agreed to that. But none of us noticed there was going to be a parking issue around Cornerstone School at rush hour time. Well, we're all guilty of that.
Thank you, Councillor.
I do have actually a question, but I'll
okay,
wait.
Come back to
ask a question about the school.
Okay.
Not this one.
Okay.
The emerging one. Can I say that now?
No, we'll come back to you. Councillor Evans.
Well, yeah, I noticed with delight.
Come back to you, Frank.
You want me to come back?
Yeah.
Okay, I will do.
Councillor Evans.
Thanks, Chair. My understanding, and I know Tim's here, we're assuming there's sufficient car parking space just down the road, Tim, for parents when they come in to pick the children up. I had a meeting with Ray and Jeff earlier this week and raised it, and I think what Councillor Woodward said is quite true. I mean, with respect, I think the consortium have got to grip this. It's getting worse. We're getting more complaints. I mean, I can give you photographs every day parking on Bluebell Way. People are parking it. I also understand, Jeff, and I know you mentioned this, that many residents have signed a covenant to say they won't park on the pavements, and yet they're doing it. And they're doing it right outside the school. And one of the houses opposite there is parking outside the bus stop. So, you know, I was there, fortunately, that weekend when that family tried to, with 2 small children, tried to walk along that pavement. And there were 4 cars on there. So, you know, we're looking to the consortium to come up with something, Jeff, because I think it's only going to get worse. And it's a growing culture. And I think it's got to be gripped. And, you know, I look forward to hear what the consortium have to say. Because, Chair, I think this is something we need to look at and continue to look at through this forum, because I don't think it's going to go away.
So just on that point, Jeff, have the consortium actually written to the people that are living in those houses that are causing the issue at the moment?
Individual developers have been writing to their residents, I understand. They have asked me as a representative of the consortium to also draft a letter on behalf of the consortium, which we'll be putting out shortly on the same subject. And we are discussing what other measures we can and should take. You know, as I said, I don't suppose we want to go straight away to towing cars, but well, that is, as Councillor Sean said, is what we might have to do eventually. But it's quite a big step, really.
Yeah, I mean, it is a safety issue, so.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
No, absolutely.
it's a major concern.
Which is why we're quite concerned as well, because it affects it. The land is private land. It's in the consortium developers. It's their insurance is on their land. I'm be interested to find out whether if someone is breaking those covenants, whether that puts their own insurance at risk. They're doing something they shouldn't do. The car gets damaged. The insurance company might think twice about paying a particular claim. So, you know, there are a number of issues at play here.
Councillor Pearson, I'll let you ask your question.
Yes, I do. I was delighted to notice in the occupation we've got now just over 900 houses, which is great. Sudden jump from what we've had seemed to be a long time of just over 700, now 900, another 200. And I recall, if I'm correct, it's the magical number to trigger development of the school. Perhaps, Ray, I'm directing the question at you, for the secondary school, which I think is 1,000. We're getting very, very close. May we ask on the behalf of the people of North Whiteley, but also the neighbouring secondary schools that also take Whiteley children presently, if there is some glimmer of planning already taking place to speed that secondary school onwards. Because some of those parents are causing traffic problems in my area. Might I say more? Ray?
Forgive me, I don't know the terms of the Section 106 agreement well enough to be able to say when the secondary school has to be built. But I do know from my colleagues who are designing the building that they hope for it to be commence construction in 2025, with it opening in September 2027.
Yes. 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the population of North Whiteley, well, the whole of Whiteley, as it now is, according to this map, is going to be what at that time?
I would have no idea, I'm afraid.
Well, it's going to be well over the trigger bench of population of triggering a secondary school. I mean, I've been in education for, well, I taught for 40 years in Hampshire.
I think Hilary has an update.
So I never found a situation, Chair, where the education planners managed to get the numbers right in order to produce the schools on time. Now, it's very.
If you'd like to give an update, Hilary.
So, sorry, can I just ask? I think previously we did have a speaker from the education department of the county council who explained the calculation they use relative to the number of dwellings and the number of children they produce of infant and junior age and secondary school age. Frankly, I cannot remember the numbers, but I do remember the person coming and explaining to this forum maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago.
Yeah, Hilary.
Yeah, so Martin Shepherd from Hampshire County Council that came and gave a presentation on it. I think I think it's 1,075 is the figure you remember, but that's for when the land is transferred to Hampshire County Council, not when the school should be built. So the trigger was when the number of occupations, when the land should be offered to Hampshire County Council.
Told Chair the trigger's 1,000. Has that changed?
No, I think it was. I think it got up to
1,000 documents. That's what we've been told all along.
I think it's 1,075 occupations. Yeah. Then the land should be offered up to Hampshire County Council to take the transfer of the land. There is no trigger to start the school.
Yeah, that
makes sense.
It's a transferred 1,075 occupations subject to there being a planning permission in place. and a project appraisal actually, but so it's ready to go. The access is there. You can see it on the photographs. So it can go whenever it's needed. But
I hear what is being said, but I would like to express disappointment on behalf of the Whiteley residents because they need that school. The schools around us who are taking presently secondary age children are also under pressure because their numbers are distorted by these pupils coming in. And of course, we're talking about traffic. It's causing traffic problems as well because some parents are driving their children up to Swanwell, for example, which is my patch, for their children to get safely to school rather than using the buses that are laid on. Well, the majority do use the bus, in fairness to them. But I express my disappointment that someone hasn't caught on.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Evans.
Thanks, Chair. Hillary's exactly right. It's 1,000 houses when they transfer the land. That's clearly what the 106 says, and we had challenged that before, but that's what they agreed in the 106.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of questions. I don't know who, Jeff, maybe this is for you. Received complaints that there's rather a lot of rubbish that's been left, either from builders or just in general. There's quite a mess around. Who's responsible for tidying up?
well, actually individual developers or builders shouldn't be throwing rubbish around, but I think probably the answer is we'll be due a spring clean. We'll organise something. I mean, I drove through today and I wasn't walking around. It didn't seem as bad as I was fearing from hearing the complaints, but we'll certainly organise a spring clean in the next few weeks, try and clear that up.
Okay, great. And just one more question. I had one on regarding the buses, the bus service. When will we have a more regular service up to Botley Station? As at the moment, it's only maybe 3 times a day, not really convenient.
I think that probably comes into the phase 2, which is a couple of years away. Realistically, we're trying to sort of get the service going, see how it goes, and then move to the next phase. And we're thinking that's going to take 2 years to that next phase of buses. But again, I think it was very well supported. We look at to move faster because I think the travel plan suggested we would be there already, but everything has been much delayed and the world is different to what it was a few years ago. So we're sort of taking it steady at the moment.
I guess it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
It is a little.
Isn't there?
It is a little, and
people aren't going to use it.
To a degree, it's the same with the putting in the shelters. We need to get the bus service running. We need to make sure it's being used and patronised, and then we move on to put the shelters in to improve it and so on. There's quite a lot of money involved in some of these moves, so you want to make sure it's done right.
So is there a date for when the shelters will be in place?
Well, I haven't got a fixed date at the moment, but again, I'll be looking to sort of make decisions on that, later this year, put them in.
Sorry, I've just got one more point then. This is about parking again. Sorry, maybe this needs to come on the next agenda, but just off the R3 roundabout near Tesco's on the weekends along Whiteley Way. I mean, it's getting quite dangerous, maybe 30, 40 cars parked down that stretch of road on the weekends. Who would be responsible for doing something about that?
Yes, I've seen the photographs, and it's much the same issue. I think these are people coming in to go for walks and things, or we think it's also people who work in the retail area who are parking there because they're not allowed to park or use up parking space on the shopping area. We're trying to do what we can. I've been trying to contact through the retail centre to see if we could get something, messages sent out there to people. That doesn't seem to have really had much effect. And we will open the road to a great deal more traffic in the future. So we might look to see what other measures we need to do again, similar to elsewhere, if it's going to cause a problem, there'll be a lot more traffic coming down that road before long. It's quite a quiet road now because it's a dead end. There's only a certain number of people living off it at the moment. But it is an issue. It's a convenient place to park for people to take the dog for a walk, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, yep, sorry.
Let me just throw a bit more light on that. We mentioned this at the meeting we had with Jeff and Ray earlier this week. From our point of view, I stood there, there's must be a lot of them are dog walkers, don't live in Whiteley. And I think some of them are also staff from the shopping centre. And I've raised that with the director there, and I'm waiting for the outcome on that. But it is going to be a problem, as we both know.
Councillor Coe.
Yeah, I just wanted to just quickly ask from like the kind of consortium point of view, it seems that there's issues that are being brought up as this project is going. And it seems there's a lot of issues of the cart before the horse with the footpath not being done, that's then creating a parking issue, which is creating that. How much flexibility has the consortium got to work with the house builders to correct those issues that are going to have an impact on the residents sooner rather than later down the line? Because obviously something like the footpath is obviously causing a problem for the school, and that's resulting to the parking. So is that a fixed date that footpath's going to be done, or is the consortium with the house builders? So I know a footpath doesn't make money, but is there that flexibility to allow these issues that are causing the residents problem? We're only at just over 900. Is there any flexibility to fix those sooner, just from an outsider perspective?
Well, by and large, in terms of infrastructure, it's gone in earlier than it was meant to strictly go in terms of the section 106. That footpath it should be in. It certainly should be in by this spring purely in terms of what the 106 would require us to do. We wanted to put it in earlier, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting. I was set up to build that half of that footpath a year and a half ago. We had it all kind of set up with a contractor, but we just couldn't. We can't just go out and do it. Sometimes you have to get certain ducks in a row, which we weren't able to do at the time. But by and large, we've tried to put it in. That the infrastructure coming down the other side of the site is going in earlier than the 106. I know it's supported by sort of some of the funding we've had from local enterprise and so on, but to that effect. But there has been the view to try and get infrastructure in as quickly as possible, where necessary. We don't like to drag our heels particularly, but try and anticipate some of the problems. But parking is always it's often an issue on developments. It was an issue on developments 20 years ago on some of the ones I worked on, and we'll often end up with the same issues trying to get double yellow lines in later. We put things like that in, and then people realise it's hard for us to enforce them, because we don't have that weight, short of, as Councillor Woodward has said, of starting to sort of hire in companies to come and remove residents' cars, and that's quite a big step for developers to go to that sort of stage.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, can I just point out, Chairman, I have at no point suggested that Jeff and his colleagues tow cars, remove cars, even touch cars. What I have recommended is that you do what many other people do in private enterprise. They employ a parking enforcement company. They put in their restrictions. Yellow lines are the easiest to recognise because in the outside world they're used as well. And people get a ticket. They get £100 ticket, and they're £60 if they pay it in 14 days. That's how it works on private land. Every inch of this development is private land. Just do it.
Okay, thank you. Right, thanks, Jeff. I think we now move on to Implementation Officer Hilary for your report. Thanks, Hilary.
Good evening again. The report really covers most of the aspects that Jeff has covered in his presentation, so I won't go over what has already been said. The only two thing that I would like to point out is that we have successfully completed the footpaths in Hangman's Copse and Sawpits Copse and reopened those to the public, which I understand have been regularly used since they've been reopened. It was quite a difficult project to get those footpaths designed and in, so I think well done to your contractors. They look really good. If there are any questions on the report, though, I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Hilary? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Hilary. Now down to item number 9. Does anyone have any ideas for future agenda items? Councillor Woodward.
To Chairman, buses. Let's have a nice detailed report on what's happening. You raised the issues of shelters and things like that, but you know, what is happening there? My question on when the money runs out wasn't answered, so it would be good to, so we can set out a framework and people locally will know. And of course, it's not just people in north of Whiteley development, it's the rest of Whiteley, and it's Parkgate, and it's Botley, and it's everyone else that could be using those buses. So when does the money run out? Let's look at the service in some detail. And the other one is education. Yeah, I'm sure Tim still there? Yeah, we'll know what's going on here and how the classes are going to fill, but I'm sure it would be useful to know as well the second primary school and timescales there, and of course the secondary school, what's happening there.
I think you've probably been reading the list that I just made. I've got one more. Yes, Councillor Evans.
Parking.
Yep, that's my third one. Yeah. So we have agenda items of buses, parking, and education, secondary school. I think someone just had their hand up in the audience. Yep. Should I ask a question? Are you able to mention anything about the cycle paths, Jeff?
There's a network of cycle paths. Bases one down the side of each of the main roads that I was showing on my presentation earlier on. There's just strategic path that we mentioned that's been delayed. We're trying to get in next to the school here. That's actually a cycle path as well. So there is that sort of provision, and I think there's other things to come, sort of, you know, lockups and that kind of stuff that go in next to the local centres and near to the schools and so on. But I don't know if that answers your question, though. It's a good question. I think on the side roads, in the parcels, it tends to be, because they're quieter, it's more on road than sort of beside the road, as a rule. Well, this is the issue we've been discussing at some length tonight, that where cycle paths are being blocked for everybody, not just cyclists. With some of the parking, which some of the problems we're trying to discuss how to solve.
I know one of the main routes, I think I'm right in saying it's going to go from Junction 9 all the way up to Botley Station. There's also a new route along Botley Road that's just been developed recently, which is now open. So yeah, there will be lots of cycling routes through the development. That's important too. Okay, thank you. Yes, Hilary.
I was just going to make the point that mostly a lot of the cycleways are shared cycleways and footpaths. So you should be able to see the signs to see which ones are shared surfaces for cycles and footpaths. I'll see if I can find a map that shows them. I've got one, but it doesn't show them very clearly, but I'll look one out.
Yep, got another lady, yes. Can you just speak up a bit?
Sorry, Chair, sorry. Could the members of the public, could you use the microphone? It's just that the recording won't pick it up.
Yeah, we don't normally allow this, but it's fine. Thank you.
So we've recently, my husband and I moved into the area, so thank you very much for the information. I think we're among the 900 odd that have moved in. My cause for concern is lack of mobile phone reception, and when might there be a secondary mast being installed? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Hilary?
Hi, we're waiting for 2 masts to be erected at the moment, one at Meadowside, and one that is in the north area near parcel 10, if you're in the north. Both of them gain planning permission. They're both going through the legalities at the moment of land transfer to the mobile companies. Okay. The one in the north, all I can get out of them is it will go up this year.
Right.
I keep chasing, but they just say it will be this year.
And the second one?
Meadowside one?
Well, as you know, we've agreed it 2 years ago. It's in legals. It's the people, we're pursuing them, and they keep saying they want certain way leaves and rights to get over the land and access in, and that's what's taking time. So it's firmly with the company, and we're just waiting for them, and we want to get it up as soon as possible, because it's bad in the existing Whiteley. If I want to get a signal where I live, I have to climb a tree virtually. So
we're in a similar
we
boat.
understand.
And also the people in the Whiteley Centre, they say it's the same too. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you just remind members of the public, more than welcome to put your name forward to about 3 days before the meeting. Just, it'd be nice to have some more interaction. Yes, Councillor Cohn.
I was just going to suggest as an agenda item, clearly there's been some valuable contributions from members of the public who are moving into the area now. Is there maybe cause to have an infrastructure review and actually to see now people are using the site? Obviously, when you make a plan, it's obviously well thought of and this will work, that will work. Parking's becoming an issue. The schools are going to become an issue. The phone reception is becoming an issue. Is it worth this forum looking at an infrastructure review of the implementation of items, and we can then pick up the concerns of the residents to help solve those problems before they become an issue like the parking further down the line? Maybe just an item to think about regards to the infrastructure, because I think you see it right across at the moment with developments going everywhere. It's fantastic, we've got these new houses, but is there enough provision for school? Is there enough provision for medical care? Because I think when you move into a new development, you want to make sure that those facilities are there for you. So maybe this forum could be useful in actually having a look at that as a review at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea of the forum, to make sure everything is kind of where it should be on time. And when it's not, we raise the questions.
Yeah, no, I get that as an item, but as an item to actually a specific infrastructure review rather than bits put together.
Okay.
If I can, Chair, I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because in terms of the planning infrastructure that's outlined in the planning application, they're already front loaded, aren't they, in terms of the planning permission, the section 106. And as each phase comes along, there's an opportunity there to sort of look back and review. I think sort of taking these through as sort of, as we wanted to encourage members of the public to register in advance and participate, because it's great, because then we can hear what's happening, can't we, on the ground, and then we can sort of table that either as a discussion here or a future agenda item and get the right people along. And I think so it works sort of in tandem in those two ways.
Okay, thank you, Councillor again. If there's no more items of business, I close the meeting. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'd just like to say before we finish, just thank all the officers for all the work they're doing and the consortium. I know it's an ongoing project, but thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you.